Good evening and welcome to our live stream. We starting with a bit of a avalanche there of various computer components. Oh well, nothing new there. And welcome to our live stream. We starting with a bit of a avalanche there of various computer components. Oh, well. Mute that guy. Don't need him going on. For some reason we seem to be oh gosh, the old American clock, live stream American clocks come in handy for once. It's a nice computer keyboard rest. So I'm going to spend the rest of tomorrow looking for my computer keyboard now. Anyway, it's up there. Anyway, good evening everybody, Andrew, Del and Tony. Hope you're all well. And today we are pretty much finishing our little torsion pendulum clock project. So we'll begin with where we were last week, which was made a little screw and blued it, which is great for the minute wheel. And today I've reassembled the movement ready to oil it. But first we need to get the suspension spring together. So let's just the usual thing. Check I can see what I'm doing. There we go, good. Okay, so our suspension spring on anniversary or 400-day or torsion pendulum clock, whatever you want to call them, they are there's a kind of standard work by the whole of our torsion pendulum clock book, which I think is the kind of standard work on the subject, and that's got an incredibly useful guide in the back for fitting or finding the right suspension spring. Now, obviously, the function of the suspension spring, in very broad terms, with a torsion pendulum clock, is similar to the function of a suspension spring in a regular pendulum clock, but in a sense, it's much more sensitive, or it's much more important to get the dimensions correct. So in the past, what I've done, like most people, is I've gone online, or before the days have been online, and bought a suspension spring unit. So you can buy them with the blocks. And when I talk about blocks, these are the blocks here. You can see, let's just have a little zoom in. We've got one in the isopropyl alcohol, so they're going to be a little bit wet. You've got a top block, which is here, a bottom block, which is here, and then a fork, which is here, which engages the what is effectively, I suppose, the lever on the pallets, or kind of like the crutch on the pallets, really. And there are various factors that are important here. Hi, Franklin, good evening. And one of those factors is, of course, the thickness of the spring. Now, I'm not that familiar with the physics of the torsion pendulum clock spring, other than, and I stuck it down to this is a spring that came with the clock. I didn't want to lose it, so I stuck it down to the inside of the lid, and that has actually worked quite well, because I knew exactly where it was. If I can just get it off there without bending it, good. So there we are. See the spring. So the spring is, I think it's a nickel steel alloy related to Elinvar which maybe actually is a Linvar. So it's basically an alloy of steel alloy that is not susceptible to changes in temperature in relation to not its expansion, but its restoring force. So its coefficient of elasticity. Normally, a piece of like regular carbon steel becomes less elastic when it's hot, as in it's more like a piece of elastic, and more elastic when it's cold. And what that does is that when the clock is cold with something like a marine chronometer, for instance, with a blued steel spring, then the clock will run faster and vice versa. So I think it was in the beginning of the 20th century, maybe the end of the 19th century, this invariable alloy of steel was developed, which has been developed many times since and is in the balance spring of most modern watches. So what we're interested in here is not the length of the spring, so expanding with heat and cold per se. It's actually, as I said, hi Mark, nice, thanks for joining us. It's the coefficient of elasticity. So that's one thing. The actual restoring force of the spring. So we've got two things that play here. If you imagine a torsion pendulum clock, pendulum still needs repairing, but let's say this is our pendulum here, and it's suspended by our little spring that we've got. So the clock isn't self-starting, like most pendulum clocks. So what we do is we put energy into the system by rotating the pendulum. So let's say we rotate it half a turn like that, and we let it go. So there are two things at play there. One is that the pendulum is very fractionally higher up because the suspension spring has twisted. So we've got gravity as a restoring force, but we've also got the thickness of the spring. So the thickness of the spring is critical to the timekeeping on a torsion pendulum clock. And I don't know what thickness this is. I could measure it with a micrometer, but it was supplied to me with the clock, so I presume it's the right one. The other factor, of course, that we can't change the elasticity of the spring, but what we can change is the length of the spring. And again, because these clocks, most of them are standardized batch or mass-produced objects, means that you can look up the model and make a model of clock, and you can find a guide for the two values that we're interested in here. So we're interested in the distance between this top block here and the bottom one, which in this case is 73 millimeters, I think. And what was the original? Thank you, Derek. And we need the distance between this top block and the fork, which in this case is 8.5 millimeters, which seems really tiny, but anyway, let's see how it goes. So obviously the beauty of the position of the fork is we can move it up and down. There are little blued steel screws there. The problem with cutting the thing to length is that once we've cut it to length, we'll have to start again. We might actually be able to get two. Yeah, we can get two out of this. So if I make a mess of it in the first place, it's not the end of the world. So you can go down this route. And I think Derek said the point, and it's a good point, of retaining the original blocks with the clock is just that the original blocks to the clock. Whereas if you buy a complete suspension unit, that's a thing that comes in the post. It's got a top block, a fork, and a bottom block, and they're, at least in theory, all in the right place. The problem with that is, of course, that the old blocks get thrown away, which is always a bit of a shame. So that's a nice idea. So we're just going to make up this suspension unit, and it's been about 3 million years since I've done one. So I can see here I've got a piece of, for some reason my sort of aspect ratio on my camera looks really weird today, but anyway, there you go. So we've got a piece of Tufnol, just any old material. I think Derek's done a very good video on this, which I advise you to go and watch. I think he uses a piece of wood, drills holes in it, I'm just using this material because it's at hand. So I'm going to measure down 73 mil. I will actually have to look with my eyeglass. It's now on the deck. So there we go. And just going to do a little hole, cover the old oil up so it doesn't get too dusty. Using the Archimedean drill again, it's just that easy really to drill it this way. There we go. Oh. So last week there we go, they're both through there. So we've got two holes that are 73 millimeters apart or thereabouts. And then we need one that's 8.5 millimeters down from the top. So I've got my little square here. And again, let's just use the old steel rule. I have to block off the view with my head. There we go. So let's just scribe a little line across there. So we've got two holes, 73 millimeters apart. I'll actually just put a little square. And I was thinking about this. If you were doing a lot of these clocks, then what you could do is you could make up jigs, especially if you've got a milling machine. You could mill some little kind of recesses on here, or even put a piece of metal on at 90 degrees. So when you popped the top block on like that, then it just kind of neatly and snugly went into that hole, and the same for the bottom one. Although the bottom one in this case is kind of all rounded, so it's a difficult thing to hold in the first place. So let's just find a screwdriver. So I'm going to pin this down. The pin, I'm going to use a tapered pin. And so this is a temporary fix just to get hold of the thing. Actually, will I be able to? Maybe we won't actually be able to get that off there. Let's do it the other way around. There is a pin that comes with this. I could actually use that, but being incredibly lazy as I am. Right, okay, so there's the first problem with my super plan is that if I use a tapered pen, of course, I won't be able to get the other half of the block on. So I need to rethink that and use either pin it from underneath, which would be quite neat, actually. I'll try to do that. It'll take me a few minutes more to broach it out. I'll just get rid of those for a second, get some brooches. Probably sort of monumentally overthinking this thing as always, but there you go. I'm sure there are many ways to do it. Let's just get a pin vise. So it's spring is round the corner, which is really good news. It's the first night. It's dark now here in Yorkshire, but it's the first night where the nights have been drawing out a little bit. Maybe actually drilled it a bit bigger, but not to worry. Yeah, so I was saying the on the go on to block. Yeah, good. So nice running commentary there from Derek about positioning the block. I hope you can all see the text there. Yeah, as I said, if you want to find out more, then our very own Torsion Dell is the person to go to. I am Torsion Clock by name, Torsion Clock by nature. And so once we pretty much get the this little clock sorted out this week, then again, I'm afraid we probably will have a little live stream break. But I mentioned last week about what we would want to do next, and there's some really good suggestions there. One of which, sorry, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just broaching out this bit of material. Yeah, it seems to have been a really I don't know why, long winter. I think it's because I've been away a lot and getting up at quite early in the morning and like, you know, going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's, yeah, it's nice that we've you can, yeah, spring just around the corner. Should have drilled the hole a bit bigger. Oh well. So yeah, we had a good couple of suggestions, and one of the things I've been wanting to do for a long time now is to, I think I probably mentioned this last week, is to work on what people call a Vienna. Oh, hi, Sean. Thank you for joining us. Is to work on a Vienna regulator, what people call a Vienna regulator, by which they don't mean a Vienna regulator at all. They mean a kind of one of those Black Forest, Southern German wall clocks. Now they're very cool because they have, right, got my pin through. Let's just see how we're doing for size. Doesn't have to be a perfect fit on there, but something like would be good. Would have helped if I'd have just measured it in the first place and drilled it, but hey ho. They've got Harrison's maintaining power and a deadbeat escapement with sort of adjustable pallets, wood pendulum rod, beat setting on the crutch. So as I said, I kicked myself because there was one of these clocks for sale on the internet, and it was really kind of just dusty. The glass was broken. It was absolutely perfect, but I missed it. And then unfortunately, everyone I've looked at ever since seems to have already been worked on, so not suitable for this thing. However, something has kind of begun to crop up today that might turn into a really interesting project. So fingers crossed for that for future live streams. But in the meantime, we've got absolutely loads going on, obviously on the Facebook group. It's been really busy today. All the usual sort of subjects that people love to talk about. And also on the other videos and things on YouTube, I want to get back to that. In fact, I've got about 12 different objects lined up here, some of which are horological and some of which are not. Right, okay, so the moral of the story here is that I should have just drilled the hole bigger in the first place, but hey ho, didn't. So let's just have a little look at that. As I said, if you were doing these clocks on a regular basis, probably worthwhile just going to tap this pin in. Everything's going to jump about probably. Just cut that off. Flat. Making up jigs. In fact, that's what I would definitely do. I just don't really repair these clocks that often. Although I do have another one waiting in the wings. So there's our little top block holder. It'd be much better if that was tighter, but it isn't. like that. And as I said, you could actually put something like, you could cut, if you wanted to make a lot, no idea what that means. If you wanted to make something more like a jig, you could cut a piece of brass shim stock and rivet it or glue it on there at 90 degrees. And that meant that the next time you got one of these clocks to repair, you could just pop on your block, and away you go. Just file that off a little bit. You can imagine it would be easier if that block was a good fit on there, but anyway, it'll have to do for tonight's demonstration. So that's our top block. Don't know if you can see here, but these screws used to be blued steel. Now, because they need to fit in, and again, this is in the benzene jar, so it's covered in liquid. It needs to fit in here at some point. Needs to fit in that. Oops, needs to fit in that slot there, which it does. But at some point, those screws presumably have been burred, and somebody has filed them down, which is a bit of a shame because the bluing is gone. But anyhow, and here's our bottom block, which has got the pin integral. I don't know which side the pin fits in. Maybe we'll need to take it apart to have a look. And again, unfortunately, the pin has gotten chewed up, so somebody's had a pair of pliers on it, which means that ideally you would replace it, I guess. Let me just check with my next drill size up. That's too big, so I'm afraid we're back to the slightly painful process of broaching out these holes. Hey ho. So yeah, some good subjects on the old Facebook group. As I said, the usual things, get people very animated, so-called cleaning, mainsprings, oiling, and what's the other thing that people get very excited about? Mainsprings, oiling, cleaning. Anyway, those are kind of three main subjects. And so that, if you're a member of our Facebook group, then that you don't have to remove the paper. Okay. Thank you, Derek. Nearly. Our little block is, come on, focus. Our little block is beginning to stick in the hole. Just needs a little bit more encouragement. Yes, if you remember our Facebook group, it's interesting to see as new people begin, then these same subjects come again, which of course is why we're still writing in the background. Our second book is chunking away and it'll be out who knows when. It seems to be taking forever, but that's just because other things crop up. And secondly, there's a really good document on the Facebook group pinned to the announcements at the top. And that document's a kind of general, how do I get my clock going thing. And Facebook's, it's one of those sort of unregulated environments that can drive you completely bonkers. But quite, I was going to say every now and again, but it's actually on a regular basis. We get people writing to us or commenting on there how they've actually gotten off the starting line with a new hobby. And of course, there's all the well-being issues related to craft that we're keen to promote and all that stuff. Right, good. Well, that block's a much, much better fit than the top one. So I presume it goes, that's a good question. So yeah, it has to go that way up, doesn't it? Yeah, it has to go that way up. Cool. So let's just get a screwdriver. Get this thing apart. Might need my glasses. Try and find a screwdriver that's a decent fit. So that one is ever so fractionally too wide. So what I'm going to do is just file my screwdriver down. I do see screwdrivers. I mean, I've had these a long time. They're quite sweet, but I see them as a consumable. Both this kind and the kind of bigger ones that you'd use on regular clocks. Gosh, the blade's very hard. Good job, that's an old file. That's really suffering terribly. Screwdriver blade is really hard, surprise. Anyway, I think that's probably made it a bit narrower. So it doesn't damage the side of the block's not narrow enough. Let's not put another one. Now what I'm going to do is just the whole any critical components, just find an actual screwdriver that's about the right width. That one looks good. Wider. I should have an actual proper set, isn't it, really, rather than about in a drawer. Look, actually striking, amazing. Good old bad American clocks, just such a trooper, it really is. How complicated can it be? Screwdriver. Just showing off really, wanted to get one that was a really good fit to make the point. Cool. Well, that one looks absolutely terrible, but it's actually quite a good fit. So I might stick with that old thing. I see, it's kind of like one of those pin vise ones. Hey-ho. I might need some glasses here as well. Sorry, you can't see my hand in the road. Right, what I might do there normally with the inside of this block is to check there aren't any burrs on there. It's just to get, because if obviously there are any burrs on there, the thing isn't going to sit square. Now, I suppose there's an argument for putting a little bit of spring at the top as well, just to keep the thing stable. Although with the two screws, it should be okay. I've just got the famous Tam O'Shanter stone and put this on the inside and just going to give it a very light deburr, just like that, just to check there are no burrs on the inside. Like that. Pop that on the pin. Comme ça. And then do exactly the same on this one. I wouldn't normally bother with this, but it's just that the blocks have had quite a sort of hard life. So try not to remove too much material, but you can see there maybe in the light. Yes, good. Thank you, Del. I will do that. Yeah, it's just one of those, the box of screwdrivers. When I was at the college, we equipped all the benches with these French-made screwdrivers, which look a bit like the famous Swiss make, but they're not as expensive, in a nice beechwood box. And I keep meaning to treat myself to one of those. They're about 50 quid. But actually these that I picked up at an auction once have kind of become one of those tools that it's just really compact. And I feel a little bit guilty about sort of retiring in them, really. So yeah, as Derek says, he recommends that you hold the spring in the block in parallel pliers to prevent it from twisting when you tighten the screws up, which is obviously a really good idea to prevent it damaging the spring. Let's just put that on there, and I'm going to actually tap this down with a bit of masking tape as well, without it getting too sticky. Otherwise it's going to be all over the shop. As I said, I think if you were a commercial repairer and you were dealing with these things the whole time, I would make up jigs. Now the end of this spring's a little bit curved round. I don't know whether that's going to matter or not. It may have to not matter. Okay, so got a bit of brown tape here, you know, not parcel tape, but sort of masking type tape, and just going to tack that spring down while we tighten it up. Be a bit careful here that you don't get the spring sticky. So it's nice actually having that scribed line down the center, so you can see quite clearly when it's in line. So I'll take Bell's advice and dig out, if I can find them, my parallel job pliers, which might be easier said than done. Still haven't unpacked from being out on the road, but got 2 weeks now, so let's get on with that. Okay, so here they are. So when Derek says parallel jaw pliers, this is what he's talking about. These ones have got brass line jaws, really nice, showing them on open claw club. And what I've done with these actually is to notch one side to make it suitable for pushing out and pushing in taper pins. So let's just pop the second half of our lock on there, and our little screws, 1 and 2. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that having this arrangement where everything is, sorry, it's not in the middle of the camera today. I don't quite know what's happened there, but I think it's just because everything gets moved every week, and for some reason never seems to be in the same position. Right, I'm going to have to turn this round to be able to get hold of it. Oh, it doesn't go on the floor. So just, I'm going to just sneak up the screws, and I'm going to just undo them. I know you can't see, sorry about that, fraction of a turn, and then employ the parallel jawed pliers to hold everything square. Really good tip. And then again, try and tighten the screws up so they're even. Of course, you've got to be reasonably tight, I guess, otherwise the embarrassingly the spring will pull through. Right. We can now liberate the sprinkling tape. It hasn't even got kinked, which is pretty unbelievable. So that's there at the top. And now what we need to do is to fix on the lower or bottom block, okay, which is across here. So let's just move that out of the way. Pop this in the hole. Like that. It's all pretty relatively tiny. And then slightly trickier here to hold the block, of course, because it's sort of, well, it isn't even round. It's just some kind of, I don't know what shape it is. It's not round. It's certainly not rectangular. It seems a little bit crazy from a sort of manufacturing perspective. Oh, well, there's a little piece of the old spring that was still trapped in there. So make sure we cut it to something like the right length. Obviously, I'll cut it as long as humanly possible, or roughly possible, and just look for, I guess you could use a pair of scissors or regular cutters. I'm just going to see if my no, they're hopeless. They're the balance spring tweezers, you know, the wherever they've gone, the Savoy type, which you use for cutting off the end of balance springs and cutting the pin. But oh, there they are. They're absolutely no good. Don't cut it at all. So abandon that and just move over to the old kitchen scissors. Don't tell anybody if you're using their kitchen scissors for cutting. Might just mark it with a Sharpie pen. For cutting metal, my mum was a seamstress and she had these really great scissors, but she used to go totally ballistic if the kids borrowed them and started cutting anything else, paper, but especially if you cut a piece of metal with them, that was, you're in for the high jump. Okay, so we've got a little mark now where just gonna chop off the spring. Hopefully don't cut it too short. That'll be embarrassing. But as I say, we've got enough to do too, so that's cool. If this one turns out to be a bit short. Okay, still needs a bit more cutting. Should really be wearing my gloves, but too much faff. Just for this. We're going to glue it down again. Still too long. Another 0.5 millimeter off. Yay! Finally. Use my bit of sort of masking tape again, just to stick it in the middle. And according to our sort of a scribe line, it's quite nice on the tape actually. It really helps you to be able to manipulate it. Right. Maybe I'll just move the camera around a bit. It's going to help me keep it in the middle of the shot rather than always being on the edge. Hey ho, one day I'll get organized at doing this. So just check what you see. Inside and the outside of the block. Bottom block, so that goes that way around. I guess this is the kind of thing that you can do in 5 minutes once you get the hang of it. Little screw in there. And there's the second one. Just snug that up for the time being. As I said, I don't really know how you tell when these things are tight enough. I suppose the problem, as I said, they must be really easy to slip through, for the spring to slip through, which would be, yeah, embarrassing to say the least. So a bit of a faff here. Right, okay, that's why you should never have magnets in your workshop, because that screwdriver is magnetized. I don't know where that's come from. Quite tricky with all the devices and things around, but that's not actually straight enough. Actually, what we could do here as well is get on one of the videos used a product called Polymorph, which is a kind of like yeah, you're right. Yeah, a scalpel might have been better. Than I could have just positioned it rather than faffing about with the big scissors. Yeah, Polymorph would be good for this, because you could just put one half of the block in the plastic, and then it would just hold it really well. Actually, that would be cool. So slightly tricky here to prevent this from rotating when we tighten it out, because it is, maybe there's just get it something like, which is easier said than done. So I'm probably speaking too soon, really, but you know, people have got, as a generalization, I think it's reasonable to say people have got a pretty sort of poor view of 400-day clocks or anniversary clocks, torsion pendulum clocks. Can't get them running. And I can see that there's a certain technique to it, but again, certainly worth spending some time on one. If you haven't fixed this kind of clock before, it's a nice introduction to the pin palette escapement. Okay, they have got enough of the block has got enough of a flat on it to enable me to tighten it up. So that, in theory, ta-da, should be our little suspension spring all pinned up. Yeah, we've got to put the fork on yet. I suppose I might as well do that now and get it all done. And parallel jaw pliers, as Derek said, coming in very handy. So there's one half. Now, I don't know, when they say 8.5 millimeters, I'm not sure. And again, Derek, if you could help out here, please, where they mean by 8.5 millimeters, because the actual fork thing is about 2 millimeters deep. I presumably mean at the bottom edge, which is the edge which is actually kind of closest to the spring. So I'm just going to stick my spring down. Reusable masking tape. Pull it nice and tight and in line like that. Right. And then flip this over. Yeah, I can only imagine that the distance, the value, spring need to be in line with pin, is the part that actually embraces the spring. But as you can see, it's a little bit of a faff, but it's not impossible to adjust this and slide it up and down once we've got the whole thing assembled. Be really cool if they steady pinned that, wouldn't it? That would make life easier. Like a watch. So I just tightened it and then backed it off half a turn. And of course, what we want here is, if you imagine these two elements of this block, you can actually adjust how parallel the two sides of the fork are, and they want to be parallel. They don't want to be diverging or converging, but we can do that when we've got it pinned on. Screwed together, I mean. And of course, we want the spring to run down the middle of the fork. A bit high, just move it down a bit. Yeah, if I thought I had to do more of these, I'd definitely make a jig. And particularly if I've got a milling machine, I would totally make a jig. It would take a couple of hours, but then done forever, which is presumably what they got in the factory. Great, that's reasonably close to our mark. As I say, we can always slip it up and down, and if we just whiz this off, hopefully I've got it the right way around. I don't think there is a wrong way around. There is our suspension spring unit. Great. Put that to one side, try not to lose it. And let's move our attention back to our movement, which needs oiling. So good. What I've done throughout this is kept the whole thing. Gosh, I hope I haven't lost my screw that I made last week. Okay. So if you can see that there, it's probably a bit out of the shot. Just focus a bit. So here's our little movement. As you can see, I clean it. I don't clean the tarnish off. I just wash the thing, peg out the bearings, clean the oil sinks out, clean everything. I actually am just going to get a bit of Rodico because we're kind of in the zone halfway between a watch and a clock here. So whereas with like a regular domestic clock, you will get away with bits of, you can never get the thing perfectly clean. You just start looking in the light, unless you've actually got a sort of clean room environment, which not many people have. So what's useful is just to have a little bit of Rodico. Rodico, this stuff, which is quite expensive. It seems for what it is, but it just allows you to mop up any tiny little fibers. Now, you will have probably heard me saying before if you can, avoid using kitchen towel. It's a nice idea, you know, they're like paper hand towel stuff, but it just generates a billion fibers. So the green, I use this photographic paper, which is quite good, but that's just because we're doing the filming. Actually, those green plastic linoleum or Bergeron type mats or a cutting mat is really good. You can just constantly wipe it down and keep everything clean. So just have a little mop up there. But you can see, so I'm moving this together. The spring is oiled inside the barrel. And let's just heat up the camera a little bit. Maybe that's better so you can see inside. And even just like handling the clock, the wheels are spinning. So we're just going to triple check that everything is totally free. I mean, we kind of know it is because obviously the so with any mechanism, any clock movement like this, once you've got it to this stage, there's no oil on it yet, other than on the mainspring. But as you can see, there's like no power on it. I mean, there is a little bit of power, obviously, because I just clicked it before to check the ratchet was working. So with no power on it, let's just make sure that that is actually completely off. Yeah, just 2 or 3 clicks. Just start and go through the whole movement with your tweezers. Right, okay. And check everything for end shake. So with the movement, either dial down or dial up, each mobile should fall totally freely onto its shoulder. So just go through everything and just check it's completely rattly loose, like that. Especially if you've done any bushing, I mean, basically don't do any bushing, but if you've done some bushing and any of your wheels, your mobiles are the tiniest bit tight and they don't fall, just take the whole thing apart and check your end shakes and side shakes and deburring, because there's no point in going forward, because what will happen is you'll start the clock going, maybe it won't have much power, but it might actually run until that bearing becomes tight and galls, and then it'll stop anyway after about 3 months. So there we are. Absolutely check with a clock like this that everything is completely rattly free. You might have made a little burr when you're putting the thing together or something like that. So this is where I go completely into the unknown, because I presume that the manufacturer of these things actually made sort of like a service manual, because they're modern clocks. Is that right, Derek? Is there a service manual by Kundo, or there must have been, for the kind of retail jewelers? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bearings to oil on this side, and obviously 7 on that side as well. And I'm going to use quite a range of oils here. So what I've got in my oil stand is, which is actually quite oily, weirdly, is 4 different, I haven't actually got 4 yet. I'm going to get quite organized enough. I'm just going to put a bit of, obviously, we just need the tiniest amount of oil here for this clock. Weeny amount. We don't want to cross-contaminate the oils if we can help it either, because obviously what you've got is a kind of slightly unusual for a clock anyway. That'll do, a little bit of T5 there. Sort of at the bottom end of the train, so near the mainspring and the barrel, you've got a relatively high load, an incredibly slow rotating mobile, and up the other end of the train, you've got an incredibly low load and relatively fast moving mobile, in the sense of in the escape wheel obviously is static for a lot of the time, and then it flicks. So we need some lubrication there, but that amount of lubrication and the viscosity of that lubrication wants to be very thin and small. So what I've got is Mobius D5, which I'm going to use on the barrel arbor just for the winding basically, and the lower intermediate wheel. So it's relatively high pressure mobiles. Then I've got Mobius D3, which I'm going to use on this next intermediate wheel and the center wheel. And then we've got Mobius 9020, which is a synthetic watch oil, and then Mobius 9010, which is another synthetic watch oil, which is the kind of like finest one. And so I'm going to use 9010 in the escape wheel and this upper intermediate wheel, and 9020 in here. So this is maybe probably over the top. You could probably use a very thin oil for everything, to be honest. But anyway, I'm gonna got it. And we only need really kind of like, well, compared to a regular pendulum clock, sort of minuscule amounts. So drop my oiler. So I'm using a bit of pithwood between oilings to clean the oiler to reduce cross-contamination. So a little bit of D3 there in the center and upper intermediate. Then a bit of 9020 in there. And then some 9010 there and in there too. Okay, so that's done the front plate. Now I'm just going to check that they're actually all lubricated. I've put my eyeglass on, and we must see liquid oil in the hole. Now with the thin oil, that's quite difficult to see because I'm using reflected light. Cool, that's done. There's actually maybe a little bit much in those top two bearings. So again, just going to use my pithwood. I'm going to squidge the end into a little point, and I'm going to dab out a tiny bit of the oil, because all that will happen if there's too much oil in there is it'll spread along the arbor, then it'll get into the pinion, and it probably won't stop the clock, but it's unsightly and not particularly kind of good practice. Okay, so exactly the same operation here, a bit of D5, so the super thick loopy stuff down the bottom, lower intermediate, like that. Clean. Could actually put a bit of, in fact I will do, a bit of isopropyl alcohol on my pithwood just to clean it even more. Bit of D3 on the upper intermediate and the center. Then 9020. Yeah. And last but not least, too much. I could probably get a thinner oiler. Bit of 90. Gosh, come on, Ray, concentrate. Bit of 9010 up there. And again, just going to check under the eyeglass that everything is actually oiled, because it's ever so easy to get excited and realize that you missed one. Okay, we're all done. Good. So there's your kind of answer, really. How much oil is enough oil? Harriet. Oh, hi, Harriet. How expensive is our oils? Not expensive enough is the answer. These are about, so this is not the most expensive. The most expensive is this stuff, and the fully synthetic. And you know, I'm not. This is one of those things that drives people bonkers. I'm not saying to use this oil or that oil or the other oil. There's a hierarchy with oil. So the hierarchy is that some oil is better than no oil at all. Don't run the clock dry. I think the second element of that hierarchy is oil in the right place. So not on the wheel teeth or pinion leaves if you can help it. The third part of that is the right amount of oil. So only just enough is the answer. You should be able to see liquid oil in all the, oh, hello, Harriet. And then the last thing, the last part of that hierarchy, so the least important thing as far as I'm concerned, is the right kind of oil. Obviously, in that you've got viscosity as well. I personally don't agree that fully synthetic oils are needed for regular domestic clocks, but that's a whole different story. Basically, the oil gets contaminated with airborne dust before it kind of runs out of steam. So I've been using these D series for 20 years now, or something like that. And they're about, gosh, I don't know, they might even be sort of £50 for one of these 20 mil things. And they last a year. And in a year, I go all over the place. And then basically at the end of the year, I relegate, I don't chuck them away, I relegate them to things like oiling my bike and stuff around the house and things like that. Or for something where you know that you're going to have to take it apart again and wash the clock. So probably here we've got 200 or 300 quid's worth of oil, which seems like a lot, but it is absolutely core to my practice. So over a year, that's a £5 a week, isn't it, on oil? Anyway, you can buy much cheaper stuff and it's probably absolutely fine. And you can buy more expensive stuff, which is the watches, really. So there's our little movement done. So let's just give it a wind, a little tiny wind. Now it's, so that's got 3 clicks of mainspring on it. Let's just watch it. It'll actually be maybe slightly reluctant to run now because of that lubrication. So it's quite good fun to watch that. I mean, I think with 3 clicks of the mainspring on it and it's running quite happily, as you can see, I think we're kind of in the ballpark there with this thing. Hold on time. Okay, cool. So we can set that to one side now. I was going to wait till it stopped running, but it's probably going to be absolutely ages. Okay, so Franklin says it pays about €25 for 20 mil. Well, Franklin, I don't know. It's probably the good old Brexit that's caused it. But I too used to pay £25, £29, and it's kind of almost doubled in the last few months. It's gone really crazy, like many things have. I'm probably going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. So you can see clock's still running there. I'll just actually leave it just at the side of the shot so you can see it there. Good, right, we've got a little repair to do on the pendulum. Let me get the parts out. Shouldn't really have flux and the clock movement out at the same time. It'd be fun just to keep an eye on that. So the pendulum broke when I tightened up the top. It kind of felt squidgy, and yeah, Mobius oil, yeah. And then I realized that the soft soldered joint had come undone. So we're just going to very quickly solder that back on there again. Clock still running on 3 clicks of mainspring. How cool is that? So let's just get our cleaned up the 2 components in with steel wool and isopropyl. Okay, so Derek uses the same oil throughout, absolutely fine. As you said, the bearings are relatively lightly loaded. And I think also with torsion pendulum clocks, they probably last a heck of a lot longer than regular clocks because they're under a shade most of the time. And that shade, or dome as some people call it, is actually incredibly well sealed, and you don't open them up very often to wind them. So, and also they always they maybe don't run actually for year after year after year after year after year because people break the suspension springs and things. But as you can see, our little clock is still, the escape wheel still spinning round crazy. Don't quite know where my lighter is, so one match left in the box. Let's check we've got some spirits in there. I think we have. So this is probably where the old fire extinguisher thing goes off. Fire alarm. Oh, well, the fume extractor's on. So hopefully that will sort it out. Okay, so let's just get a bit of flux on the end of here. Don't need much. I think we can probably just, sorry, I think we'll probably just solve this back together as it is. I don't necessarily think we need a whole lot more solder on it. I was just probably very kind of clumsy with it. It seemed to have got quite a bit of solder on already. So, we'll have a look. Critical and put a tiny bit on. Repurpose watching or like that. Just that. Flux is boiling. And there we are, our solder has run. That's all we need. Allow it to cool before we put it down. Oh, cover that up. Turn that off. Where's the, oh, there it is. So just get the old in the isopropyl. Could take it off and probably wash it in soap and water, but there you go. I don't know if you've seen in the corner of the shot where the little clock movement is still spinning round after all that time. That's pretty crazy. Doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's quite cool. So just wash off our flux. Yeah, soft soldering doesn't have to be high drama. Right, Okay, that should be. If I were doing this kind of like regular, I would go and give it a really good dousing in hot soapy water, because the number of times when I'm out in the field and I see, regular plumbing flux, this stuff, ta-da! It is, don't know what it is. It's just for this soft soldering, LA Co. I think it's American, is it? brianhyde.co.uk. Made in the USA. Ta-da! There, shows that. And lost the label off the solder, but again, it's just regular electrical solder. For soft soldering, obviously hard soldering is a totally different thing. And amazingly, the little movement continues on. Maybe it's perpetual motion. Well, I'm almost certain it is. I think that's it. So there's our pendulum. Exciting, getting towards, probably getting towards the point where I think, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. Okay, let's just put this together. Then we've got to assemble the little frame. And then that's about it, really. Obviously, we've got to put the pallets in and so on and so forth. Let's just get this back together again. All right, I won't over tighten it this time. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So I'll just set it so it's about halfway through it. So the regulating zone, you can see there's a thread under the top nut, and we'll just move it so it's about halfway. I've already oiled and put some grease inside this thing. So it was just that the thing fell off the top, the little suspension hanger thing. So that's good to go. That's halfway through its regulating sort of cycle. So next thing, I think that's all our kind of repairs done, is to try and remember to figure out how the whole thing fits together. So I suppose what I can do is we need a friction washer for the motion work, but I'm not going to worry about that at the moment, or the dial. Just have to find the hundreds of different parts that make up the movement stand. I suppose I should or could or might have done this offline, but we've got a quarter of an hour yet. We may get it done, who knows. So I think the only kind of big thing to do on this clock now, plumber's flux, yeah, just the stuff you use for the pipes in the central heating. The only thing to do now is to set the thing in beat. Now, I don't have one of those magic little beat setting tools, so I'm going to have to do some kind of bodgery there. Derek, I guess Derek's got one of those beat setting tool things that you buy from somewhere. Gosh, so many parts. I've got no idea really what all these parts do, so probably embarrass myself by, I think they're seat board screws. Setting it all up incorrectly in the first place. That must be it, surely. Got some motion work, got a cannon pinion, got some hands. Somewhere I hope is a little blued steel screw that I made last week, although I can't actually see it. Must be there somewhere. Cool. Oh, another washer. Screw plates. Well, that is, I don't think there's anything to do with it. No idea where my little loose. Oh, it's there. Good. I'll put that in the box. Screw that I made last week. So, that was, so this might well be like watching paint dry. All right, it's finally come to a rest. The clock. So let's just have a little look. How much setup it's got on it. So they are obviously the feet. Adjustable feet. Sorry, this is one of those party games. They're obviously the studs for the movement. So that must be the upper end. And that must be the lower end. So presumably, with this being German, everything has got washers. It's got to have washers. Proper. I'll put the washers the right way out, and that'll prevent the makers from getting really annoyed. One ball on pendulum is too high. Oh, so it is. Ah, there's maybe some gritty cob stuck inside. Well spotted, Derek. Eagle-eyed. There we go. So that's about where those were screwed into before. And that. Put these little pipes on top, which presumably they've got the right way up. Nice little roses on them. Such a sweet clock, this. Really love it. Yeah, that looks right, correct way up. Yeah, I think so. Then we've got a little, that's the top like that. Brass spacing pieces, so presumably they go like that. Seems to be an incredibly long time since I took this thing apart. It's actually quite fun. And again, I really am a massive fan, as many of you will know. And Harriet, if she's still there, she'll be laughing like a drain because she knows how terribly disorganized I am and everything. But actually, getting all this clean in the first place is so nice, because the temptation, of course, is when you get to this stage, is to put things together and not bother cleaning the case, tut and all that stuff. Right, okay, so might need a little bit more thread sticking through, I don't know. So we've got some little finial things here. And along there. Square up our roses. We don't want those on the skew. Good. That looks okay. There's our seat board screws. We've got that slightly worrying assembly to deal with yet, and should use a spanner, but I'm going to use my brass lined pliers to nip up those little nuts. And then this goes through, goes in there. And that. So this is the kind of eccentric that locks up the pendulum. Something like that, if I remember correctly. We've got a washer, spring, a nut. Again, try and get the nut the right way out. Like that. So where and how does the spring go? Oh, that makes sense of the, that also makes sense of that other brass screw as well that we've got. on there, totally making it up as I go along. Hope that's screwing there. We've got satisfyingly few parts left over now, so that's good. Oops. Tut, tut, tut. Use the right screwdriver. Derek could be going bonkers. Mustn't lose the pallets there. That would be embarrassing too. That's better. Right, so that nut needs to be tighter. So what this is I don't know when the off and on position is meant to be, but at one position, this lever prevents the pendulum, allows it to rotate, and in the other position, I haven't tightened the nut up enough. It locks it in place like that. So I think we're kind of in the ballpark. I don't know whether there's a particular on and off position. Let's just be good for once and actually tighten that nut up. So if I leave it, it'll never get done. Oops. Quite a tricky thing to hold because there's actually nothing to hold at the other side. Yeah, don't do this at home. Get your socket set out or an actual spanner that actually fits. Although the brass line pliers are not too bad, I suppose. There we go. Right, put that together. Would be nice to get it kind of equidistant so it runs from one state to the other. I see there's a long kind of locked bit there, so as long as it doesn't touch that foot, a little bit tighter. Good, I think we're good to go. Let's bring on lever on. Washers on pillars, yes, yeah. Funny, yeah, sort of not being in familiar territory with these things. Good, works nicely. So there's our little pendulum lock. On and off. Pop the movement on. I suppose I could actually put the dial and everything on first, but I think it's going to actually make it easier for handling. Now you'll remember when we took the thing apart, the bottom pillars here are drilled and screwed for the seat board screw things, and this one's got a little cutout for the great wheel. So I did actually remember to put those in straight, because normally I'd get to this stage and go, oh, I've messed that up. So, Derek, in terms of oiling the lever, the pallets, do you? I mean, I would oil the pallet pins on the escape wheel, but what interests me is whether you oil the fork and the pin. Right, just do the seat board bolts up hand tight. They've got knurling on them. Looks terrible if you get a pair of pliers on there. Okay, so let's just find our tweezers. Using the old soldering. Drafting another pair. Pop the pallets in like that. And the cock, which is there, and I must have some screws. Missing. A pair of screws. It's just I never oil pallets or fork or pin. No need. Okay, right. Well, there you go. I mean, certainly in a watch, you don't all oil the lever or the pallet pivots, so I'm perfectly happy with that. Might be cheeky and put a tiny bit on the pins because quite a lot of sliding action there. So, but I'm perfectly happy not to put any on the pallet pivots. So let's just wind again. What I'm going to check now is that the escapement actually functions. So if you can see it there, so I haven't got the macro lens on, but yeah, I can hear the spring settling down. That's good. Yeah, look, the escapement's ticking away like a good one. Okay, so let's get our spring, and somewhere probably still got the pin that came with it, I guess. And I've got the shade as well. The clock came with a shade, so thank you, Derek, for that. It needs cleaning. Really satisfying when you've had a project, particularly one that's kind of gone on for a while like this, as it does because it's sunny. Once a week we work on it. Right, well, these pins are in pretty kind of graunchy condition, so I might replace them, but they want to be parallel pins. But let's just talk about the beat setting first. So this top block for the suspension is just kind of quite crudely riveted in to the back cock here, into the pendulum support. And so it's a friction tight fit. Somebody's actually had a go at this, but you can just very, with my bronze tweezers, move it around. I'm just going to put it square to start with. But there is a little tool that you can buy. Maybe I should buy one. So I didn't actually. Sorry, Derek, did you have you got one of those tools? So why isn't that screwed on there? Maybe that there's. No, there's something wrong with that. I think there's a gritty cobs in the side ball thing. That's why it won't screw on. Can't see anything inside there. Let's just have a little poke about with a drill. No, it seems clean. Don't know what's going on. Just put a bit of oil on it. Oh, I know what I might do. I'll just try a different one in a different place because the others are quite loose. Notice it's had some brasso on it, so somebody's been at it with a polish at some point. Oh, that screws on there, fine. So it's something to do with this thread. The good thing about these threads, of course, is that they're just sort of modern threads, so no problem to clean out the thread if it's got a bit mangled up. Cool, bit of oil on there. Slide it out. Let's just check which of these pins fits, if any. I guess these should be glued steel. That one's not too bad. Put that one back in. So I should check this first as well. That actually fits in there. I've never had this together, so again, that would be a bit embarrassing if the bottom block doesn't fit in the slot because of burrs or some damage to the screws or something. It does, great. It's tight. So I just need to have a little look at that because I don't want to break the spring. So just have a look in here. And yeah, I'm just going to get a very fine needle file. Perfect. All right, okay. Derek says, don't buy the tool. Good, Derek. Glad I didn't buy the tool. And I was today looking for a pair of pliers that I could modify, so that's what I'll do. So just deburring the slot to check that that's not what's stopping our spring from going in, which I should have checked before, actually. Doesn't matter which way around it goes. Of course, now it's on the spring, it is super vulnerable. So it's, actually, I wonder whether it's the bit that we've soldered. That insert is probably a bit high because it goes in, or maybe the screws are burred as I thought. This needs to hang freely. It being tight like that is no good at all. It's gone in the slot, but it's too tight. It's going to damage the spring. So let's just have a little look and see why it's tight. Now remember that somebody's had a hold of this with not with these brass line pliers, but just with regular pliers. So I presume it's absolutely covered in burrs. In fact, it could be the pin, which would be a bit of a pain because it'll mean I'll have to take it all apart again. So if the pin's damaged, which it is, then it might be the pin that's preventing it from turning. That's always the problem, of course, when you get hold of something with your pliers and start damaging it, that it has a knock-on effect. Also, the screw heads are actually quite long. They're not the screw heads, the screw shank is quite long. So maybe I'll have to take them out and just shorten them a little bit. Don't quite know why that would be. Yeah, Franklin, you are right. We've got an absolute multitude of burrs. I don't really want to just start filing it because I'll just end up with with by causing more damage, it's something that I need to take a little bit more time over. Right, good. Ah, well, that was that. So there we are. It's much better. Not quite totally free, but certainly getting there. So what I can do here is just to put on, you could put a bit of blue pen on, you know, a bit of Sharpie pen, and see where the high spots are. Put it back in there. Put it back in the clamp. Yeah, I think it's those screws. So ideally, you take these out and maybe put them in the lathe. I'll just hold them in a pin vise or something, and just take a fraction of material, because all this is going to do is it's going to end up making a mess of the block, which is not where we want to be. So I mustn't do this too much, otherwise I'm going to make a mess. So yeah, I guess the pin is just driven in there. So we need to drive the pin out, get the screws out, tidy up the ends, and then hopefully it'll be a relatively easy fit in the pendulum. It's pretty close, but it's not close enough. If it's tight, it will damage the spring. Even if you were to set it up, the first person that moves the clock, inevitably it will cause a problem. You need to be able to just hook the pendulum on, which I'm making a complete faff of it, of course. We're getting there, but it's not loose enough still. That's a shame. So let's just go back and get this in here. Make sure that the fork embraces the little lever on the pallets. Which it's actually too tight. Okay. So what I'm going to just try here is to tighten up the back screw and release the front one a little bit, because I don't want to start bending the fork out. And as I said, with that, it's really important that the fork is parallel. Again, should have probably tried this. Yeah, well, that's helped. It's now entering the slot. The problem is it can't be tight. If it's at all tight, then it won't. The clock won't work. It doesn't want to be sloppy either. It just wants to be like a crutch on you know, on a regular long case clock. You just want that tiny bit of movement there. So if this is too tight for our pin, and the fork is beginning to open up, so kind of diverging, then we need to think about what we're going to do about that. And again, don't really want to get into the position where we're beginning to remove material. That's not where we're at. We're just going to end up causing more problems just looking for burrs there. what's worth doing is getting something like a needle, a really shiny bit of hardened steel, if you think there are burrs, and just burnishing the slot. Sorry, I need my eyeglass again to have a little look. Right. So it's now fitting in the slots. We're talking about tiny amounts, really, really tiny amounts of movement on these things. And maybe that's where people, and me included, get into trouble with these clocks, because if you've been repairing, you know, like your regular domestic clock, and then you start working on one of these, you've got to really get into a different sort of mindset, because those burrs and things that you might put on components are going to really bite you here. So we've now got the block in, but the fork's too narrow. Gosh, it's really marginal. It's incredibly marginal. I think it's too narrow. It should be, again, totally free, and it seems to me that it's a little bit tight. So it's going to cause a problem. We'll see. And then again, this whole arrangement. Oh, well, that's interesting because okay, so we've got some adjusting to do here because our suspension spring is too long. It might be that I measured it too long, although I thought I was certainly within 0.5 millimeter, but you can see here that, come on, given this locking mechanism at the bottom, now I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just simply that there is, the suspension spring is quite a lot too long. Maybe I measured it wrong. It's actually about 5 millimeters or something like that. So let's just have a little look. Back to the drawing board with the spring. So there's a few things we've got to do here before this clock's going to actually run. And of course, these are the really critical parts where it can get frustrating, but you just got to know. We know that the movement runs really sweetly. I haven't got the motion work on yet, but that's not a problem here. As long as that minute wheel screw we made is loose, as in the minute wheel's free. So we've got 3 problems. The spring's too long, which may be me. If I can find my little jig. And I wanted 73. Yeah, well, I aim for 73 and sticking up for myself. It is pretty damn close to 73. So either, well, there can't be anything wrong with the height of the distance between the pendulum and the thing. And I don't think that makes any difference if it's screwed in. Well, it's got to be in the middle of the adjustment anyway. So the spring needs shortening by a lot, actually, about 6 or 7 millimeters. What can this be just where them? Right, okay, yeah. So as Derek says, there's a few things here. So the first thing is that this gap here in the fork is too small. There is no gap, basically. The pin does fit within the fork, but there's no free movement there at all, and there needs to be, otherwise it won't work. No point in me putting it together. The second thing, obviously, is there's been some damage to this bottom block, and I don't really want to start filing things, so I'm going to take it apart, and I'm going to just dress those screws and check there are no burrs on the sides of those little brass blocks, and I think that's going to resolve it. But the slight mystery is, according to the book, and I don't think I've assembled this incorrectly, although I might have done, it's maybe a Durr movement, is that the spring is too long by quite a bit. So there you go. So a little bit more work to do, but I will get that finished during the week, and I will share it on Facebook. And in fact, I think hopefully this is a really kind of supportive experience, because I mean, I'm not massively expert in these clocks, as you can see, but you could get to this stage, you've cleaned everything, you've had the spring out, you've made that new screw, and you're really excited to get the whole thing going. But then one or two tiny things appear to conspire to prevent the clock from working. Well, ironically, of course, the old suspension spring wants to act like all the rest of the clocks in here. Maybe it's been apart too long and it's got the wrong idea. So it is actually working as a pendulum clock, but I'm not quite sure I'll get away with that. So we've got three tiny things that could drive you completely bonkers, but we will get it running. And then, as Derek said, I won't buy one of those tools, but what we need is a piece of steel or some modified pliers that fit in here without damaging the spring to be able to enable us to put the clock in beat. But actually, maybe the best way of me showing that is to get, when I get round to that stage, is to get the macro lens out and make a short video, which I'll do for the Facebook channel. And I will show these little faults and how that causes a problem. But otherwise, I think we're done. So here, cleanliness of the clock is really critical. We lubricated the mainspring, made that little screw. So all in all, a relatively straightforward project. We had to do a little repair on the pendulum, but I feel with another hour of fiddling and trimming things, we're going to be getting there. As I say, I'll share it on Facebook, and we won't be here next week. Ta-da, this will be done. And I'll make a little film of it when it's ticking away. And it's really a case of us finding another clock for the live stream. So we have maybe got something actually quite exciting. It's only just started to come together today, so it'll take a bit of negotiating. But there you go. We'll be back at some point. We'll let you know via Facebook and other social media. At the end of this month, I think it's the 25th, there's an ICON, that's Institute of Conservation event, which is going to be talking about the whole wide issue of dynamic objects. I'll share that again on Facebook group with people. But otherwise, again, thank you for your company, and we'll be back. And yeah, thanks very much for all your support with these live streams. And if not, next week we will see you on the Facebook group, and then throughout the spring and summer we've got a whole load of other repairs, both for the How to Repair Pendulum Clocks channel and for the Read Repairs channel as well. So plenty content coming up, and let us please, if you can share your projects on Facebook group as well, that's always appreciated. That keeps the whole thing on the road. So thanks very much, and lovely to see you all, and bye for now.